I caught my wife cheating with our landlord on my sick day. She begged for forgiveness, so I pretended to forgive her, then erased the novel she spent 3 years writing. Funny how I used to be one of those guys on forums, passionately defending women when someone shared their story of betrayal. I typed things like, "Not all women are like that. You just need to find the right one." It feels absurd now. I was so convinced of that belief. Why wouldn't I be? Jenna and I had been married for 6 years, and she'd always seemed trustworthy. At least, that's what I believed. She never gave me a reason to doubt her. If anything, she was the one who'd come forward about inappropriate advances from coworkers or friends. She'd show me the text messages, call the behavior gross, and we'd laugh it off. She even distanced herself from her best male friend when I confessed I felt uneasy about how close they'd become. That's the kind of person I thought I'd married. Someone loyal. Someone who put us first. Looking back, though, all those reassurances feel like an elaborate farce. I wonder how many others in my position thought they had the perfect marriage, only to have it implode in spectacular fashion. The bitter truth is this: you can't trust anyone. Not your family, not your friends, and certainly not the person who shares your bed every night. I'm 33 now. Jenna is 31. Until recently, I honestly thought we were solid. Sure, we had the occasional argument, but compared to the stormy relationships of friends, ours seemed unshakable. We never went to bed angry, prioritized date nights even when money was tight, and always supported each other's ambitions. Jenna was helping me prep for certifications to advance my career, and I was her biggest cheerleader for her writing. That's what makes this betrayal sting even more: how much effort I poured into being her rock. We lived in a converted house split into 4 apartments. The landlord, an older guy probably in his 50s, owned one of the units. He seemed decent enough at first, fixing things when needed and keeping the building maintained. Sure, there were occasional arguments over minor issues like parking or noise, but nothing serious. We even sent him baked goods on holidays, more out of politeness than genuine friendship. That setup worked for me. Neighbors kept to themselves, no forced interactions. Turns out I should have been paying closer attention to what was happening in my own home. Jenna works from home as a copywriter, going to the office only a couple of times a month. I, on the other hand, work in construction management. My job demands long hours, leaving at dawn and coming home well past sunset most days. Sometimes I'd feel guilty about leaving her alone so much, but she always reassured me, saying she was proud of how hard I worked for us. She'd have dinner ready when I got home, or draw me a bath after grueling days. It felt like we were a team, tackling life together. I should have known better. The day everything fell apart started innocuously enough. I woke up feeling awful. Headache, congestion, the works. Normally, I'd push through and go to work anyway, but something in my gut told me to stay home. Maybe it was intuition. I told my boss I was taking a personal day, grabbed coffee for Jenna from her favorite cafe as a surprise, and headed back. I even imagined how thrilled she'd be to have an unexpected day together. When I pulled into the driveway, everything seemed normal. Her car was parked where it always was, and the neighbor kids were playing in the yard. But as I approached the front door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. That was strange. Jenna was meticulous about security, triple-checking locks and insisting on cameras and a video doorbell. Alarm bells started ringing in my head, but I brushed them off. Maybe she stepped out for the mail or groceries, I thought. Still, my gut told me otherwise. Nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into. There, on our couch, the same couch where we spent countless nights watching movies and where her parents sat during Christmas dinner, Jenna was bent over, wearing nothing but one of my t-shirts. And behind her, with his pants around his ankles, was our landlord. I froze. The coffee cup in my hand tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents onto the rug. That sound snapped them out of their bubble. Jenna shrieked, scrambling to cover herself with the very shirt that belonged to me. The landlord fumbled to pull his pants up, his face red, not from shame, but likely from fear of what I'd do next. I stood there, fists clenched, watching the scene unravel. My mind couldn't reconcile the image in front of me with the life I thought I had. 6 years of marriage, Every late night, I worked to build a future for us. Every "I love you," she whispered. It all felt like a cruel joke. The landlord bolted past me, too cowardly to meet my eyes. I let him go, though every fiber of my being wanted to make him pay. Not because I forgave him. Oh no, his reckoning would come later. But I wasn't about to ruin my life over two people who clearly didn't care about mine. That left Jenna. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person I married. She wasn't the woman who claimed to love and respect me. No, she was a stranger who had just ripped my heart out and stomped on it without a second thought. My nails dug into my palms, so hard I could feel the sharp sting of blood welling up. I couldn't unclench my fists, not even for a second, because if I did, if I let even a sliver of that rage escape, I knew I'd do something I'd regret for the rest of my life. I've been angry before, sure, but this was something else. This was raw, unfiltered fury, tangled with the kind of pain that makes you want to set the whole world on fire. It was the kind of anger that turns decent men into monsters. And I wasn't about to let it consume me. She stood there, clutching my t-shirt to her chest, as though modesty suddenly mattered. The same woman who just desecrated our couch with another man now had the audacity to act meek and vulnerable, as if she were the victim. That pathetic attempt to manipulate the narrative, to make me feel guilty for walking into my own home and catching her in the act, only stoked the fire inside me. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the grotesque performance she was putting on now. So this is what happens when I'm not around, I thought bitterly, my voice emerging cold and sharp, like a blade. It didn't even sound like me. Her response was a chaotic mess of stammered half-sentences and pitiful excuses, each one more insulting than the last. It wasn't. I didn't mean, she stuttered, grasping at anything that might lessen the blow of her betrayal. She couldn't even finish a sentence. Was it just a mistake? Just a one-time lapse in judgment? Just a complete obliteration of our marriage for a cheap thrill with a man twice her age? Whatever it was, her trembling and tripping over her words gave me a grim, twisted satisfaction. It was a sliver of justice, however small, to see her squirm. I'd never been aggressive with Jenna before, never raised my voice or even argued harshly. But this was different. I stepped toward her, and she instinctively backed away, fear flashing across her face. That look, as if I was the danger, was almost too much to bear. This was the same woman I'd held close when she was sick, the same one I'd gone out of my way to make happy, whether it was driving hours to surprise her with her favorite dessert or working overtime to buy her that top-of-the-line laptop for her writing. And now, she stood there, scared of me? The absurdity was suffocating. I reached out and grabbed the collar of my shirt, the one she was using to shield herself. Her eyes darted everywhere but at me. The floor, the walls, the door her lover had fled through. She couldn't even muster the decency to look me in the eye after shattering everything we'd built together. I tugged on the fabric, forcing her closer, but she still refused to meet my gaze. Each time I tried to lock eyes with her, she turned her head like a coward. That lack of respect, that refusal to face what she'd done, made me shove her away. Maybe harder than I intended. She stumbled and crumpled onto the floor, still clutching that damn shirt like it was some kind of shield. Sitting there on the carpet, she looked pitiful, but I felt nothing for her, not love, not pity, not even sorrow. Just a simmering disgust. I turned toward the door, needing to get out before I lost what little control I had left. As I walked out, I heard her weak, quivering voice call after me. Babe, the way she said it, like she could still manipulate me with that tone, the same one she'd used to convince me to stay home from work or to take her on a last-minute vacation, only made my stomach turn. I slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, desperate to create as much distance between us as possible. I got into my car and just started driving, no plan or destination in mind. The act of moving, of putting space between us, was the only thing keeping me from imploding. I must have circled the neighborhood 50 times. Each time I passed our building, my grip on the steering wheel tightened, the urge to turn back and confront them threatening to overwhelm me. I knew exactly where they were, him, probably cowering in his apartment downstairs, and her, right where I left her. But I kept driving, forcing myself to push those thoughts aside. Eventually, I found myself parked in a Walmart lot around 2 in the afternoon, staring blankly at nothing. People went about their lives, oblivious to the wreckage of mine. Families shopped together, couples held hands, elderly folks helped each other with groceries. It was maddeningly normal, like the world hadn't just collapsed. I stayed there for hours, my phone vibrating endlessly with messages from Jenna. I didn't read a single one. The sun had long since set by the time I finally went back. Part of me hoped she wouldn't be there, but deep down I knew better. Sure enough, she was on the couch, the same couch where I'd found her earlier. She'd changed into the pajamas I'd bought her last Christmas, her face puffy and red from crying, tissues strewn everywhere. It was a pathetic tableau, straight out of one of those overdramatic movies she adored. Except now, her tears weren't moving. They were infuriating. She wasn't crying because she regretted betraying me. No, those tears were for her, for the inconvenience of being caught, for the disruption of her cushy double life. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Please, baby, I want to talk. Just sit down." The audacity of her using that word, baby, sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. I didn't sit on the couch. I'd never sit on that thing again. Instead, I lowered myself into the armchair across from her. Not out of compassion, but because I wanted to hear what ridiculous excuses she'd try to spin next. I sat there, not out of compassion or hope, but to see what sort of excuses she'd conjure up. Jenna just stared at me, tears streaming down her face, until she finally began her predictable monologue. The classic cheater script. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled. Sorry she got caught, no doubt. She followed it with the usual nonsense. It was a stupid mistake. Sure, a mistake she'd likely been making for months. Then came the real slap in the face. She actually tried to pin it on being lonely while I was out working to support us.
And the kicker?
She blamed her actions on being horny and him making suggestive comments, as if she were some helpless puppet. She made it sound like she had no control, as if she accidentally ended up bent over the couch with him. Next thing I knew, she trailed off, dissolving into another fit of tears. Next thing she knew? Really? As if it was some magical series of events that just unfolded without her involvement. She just happened to strip off her clothes, just happened to position herself on our couch, and just happened to let a man old enough to be her father have his way with her. In our living room. The woman in front of me wasn't the Jenna I thought I knew. This wasn't the woman I married. No, this was an imposter wearing her face, living in my house, spending my money, and evidently sleeping with our landlord. Now, she was putting on the performance of her life. Through the sobs, she swore up and down that it was the first and only time anything like this had happened. She even put her hand on her heart, a gesture she used to reserve for serious promises to me, and vowed it would never happen again. The wild part? She almost sounded convincing. 6 years of marriage, and I'd never caught her lying before. At least, not until today. But you know what? It didn't matter. Not one bit. Here's what cheaters never understand. It's never just one bad decision. It's 1,000 little ones, each a deliberate choice to betray their partner. She chose to flirt back when he made those comments. She chose to invite him into our apartment while I was out busting my ass to provide for us. Every step of the way, she had an opportunity to stop, to say no, to think about her husband of 6 years. But she didn't. She chose her momentary pleasure over everything we'd built together. As I sat there, listening to her pathetic sobs and empty apologies, the realization hit me, even if I wanted to forgive her, even if I was stupid enough to try, it wouldn't matter. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces that no amount of effort could ever mend. And then there was the landlord. He lived right downstairs. Every day, I'd have to see his smug face, knowing what he'd done with my wife. Every time I passed him, I'd have to fight the urge to knock his teeth out. That wasn't a life I could live. I cut her off mid-apology. "Stop," I said. "Just stop. We're done." She tried to argue, of course. She begged, pleaded, promised we could go to counseling, that she'd do anything to fix this. But what was there to fix? You can't undo what's been done. You can't unfuck someone. The moment she let him touch her, it was over. I wanted to throw her out right then and there, to let her run to her new man and see how much she enjoyed life with someone older than her father. But I knew I couldn't stay in that building, not with him there. So instead, I went to our bedroom, grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and started throwing clothes into it. No folding, no organization, just shoving 6 years of my life into 2 bags like I was some kind of war refugee.
Which, in a way, I suppose I was.
Jenna followed me around, sobbing and begging me to stay. She offered to leave instead, said she'd go stay with her sister, said she'd do anything to make things right. The irony of her desperation only made me laugh bitterly. I wouldn't dream of separating you from your man, I told her. You two seem so happy together. Maybe he'll let you move in with him. You already know where he lives. Her face crumpled, as though I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel just a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted on me. She collapsed onto the bed, wailing into the sheets, but I didn't care. I just walked out. Didn't look back, didn't hesitate. I've been holed up in a cheap motel for 2 days now, the kind of place that reeks of bleach and has paper-thin walls. I called in sick to work, first time I've done that without actually being sick. My boss probably thinks I have COVID or something. I don't care. I can barely function. It's 3 a.m. as I write this, sitting on a lumpy bed that's probably seen better days. I needed to get this out, to tell someone what happened. I keep thinking about revenge. I know it's petty. I know it won't fix anything. But right now, it's the only thing that keeps the pain at bay. Time might heal all wounds, but for now, revenge feels like the only bandage that fits. It's been a week since that night. And, well, I've done something I need to confess. I'm not one of those people who can hurt others without feeling guilty. My conscience nags at me, even now. But what I did, I think it's fair payback for what she did to me. Let me tell you about Jenna's dream. Not the fake dream of our perfect marriage, but her real dream. The one she's had since before I even met her. Jenna always wanted to be a writer. Not just the marketing copy she churned out for work, but a real author, like her idol Colleen Hoover. Romance novels, drama, all that stuff that sells by the millions. It's all she ever talked about. 3 years ago, she finally started writing her novel. I remember it vividly. She came home with an overpriced notebook, eyes sparkling like a kid on Christmas morning. And me, like the idiot I am, I supported her completely. Bought her a new laptop specifically for writing, set up an office space in our spare room, brought her coffee and snacks while she worked. I even read every chapter she finished, giving her feedback and encouragement. You're going to be the next big thing, I used to say. I'd always been Jenna's biggest supporter when it came to her dream of being a writer. Whenever she shared a new chapter, I'd tell her how amazing it was, encouraging her to keep going. And honestly, her book was good, really good. It was a layered story about family secrets and forbidden love, brimming with twists and emotional depth. The irony of that theme isn't lost on me now. Jenna poured 3 years of her life into that manuscript, writing every single day. At over 90,000 words, nearly 360 pages, she was so close to finishing. All she needed was the climax and the final 2 or 3 chapters. She'd been talking about it just 2 weeks ago, lying in bed beside me, excitedly describing how she planned to reveal the big twist at the end. She was so proud of what she'd created, and back then, so was I. I couldn't wait to read the finished product. But things change. After a few days of stewing in that bleak motel room, I texted Jenna, saying I wanted to come home and talk. The response was instant. She bombarded my phone with messages. Yes, baby, please come home. I miss you so much. We can fix this. It was almost pathetic how predictable she was. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I had to play my part, make her think there was a chance for redemption. When I walked through the door, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. She'd cleaned the entire apartment, probably the first time she'd lifted a finger since the landlord wasn't busy defiling our furniture. She'd even made lasagna from scratch, my favorite dish, using the recipe her mom had taught her after we got married. The level of manipulation was almost impressive. For hours, I let her spew her rehearsed sob story. How sorry she was, how she'd never speak to the landlord again, how she loved me and couldn't live without me. She promised to do anything to fix what she'd broken. I nodded along, offering just enough non-committal phrases. I need time, and I'll think about it. Classic lines designed to give hope without actually committing to anything. When bedtime rolled around, she tried to coax me into our bedroom. First, it was the doe-eyed look, then a subtle touch on my arm and chest. The same moves she'd probably used on the landlord. I shut that down immediately, telling her I needed space and would sleep on the couch. She looked disappointed but tried to mask it. "Whatever you need, baby," she said, her voice dripping with false understanding. Her laptop was right there on the coffee table, exactly where I knew it would be. Jenna always left it there after working on her novel late into the night. Some habits never change, even when you've destroyed your marriage. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, then gave it another hour to ensure she was asleep. The password? Our anniversary date. She never bothered to change it. Her manuscript folder was easy to find. She had it saved in 3 places: the desktop, an external hard drive, and her cloud storage. She was diligent about backups, a habit I'd encouraged when I set up her accounts. Another way I'd supported her dream. I hovered over the delete button for a full minute, cursing under my breath. 3 years of work, 90,000 words, countless hours of writing and dreaming. It all came down to this. My finger trembled on the mouse pad, and for a split second, a voice in my head screamed at me to stop. "This is too far. You'll regret it." But then I thought about that scene on the couch, about the betrayal, the humiliation. And just like that, the hesitation vanished. I deleted everything. The desktop copy, the backup, the cloud version. Then I emptied the trash. Just to be sure, I ran a file shredder program to erase any trace of recovery. 3 years of her dream project gone in less than 5 minutes. But I wasn't finished. I logged into her email and erased every copy she'd sent to herself or her beta readers. I found drafts she'd shared with her writing group and deleted those, too. By the time I was done, there wasn't a single word of her manuscript left anywhere. Her dream, her future bestseller. It was as dead as our marriage. I've done some questionable things in my life, but erasing someone's dreams like that? It hits differently. Don't get me wrong. Anytime guilt starts to creep in, I remember that image of her with the landlord and the guilt vanishes. Still, having a conscience can be a real pain sometimes. The day after I wiped her manuscript from existence, Jenna acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, answered client emails, and worked on her copywriting assignments. But she didn't touch her laptop for creative writing. That was unusual. She always managed to write a few hundred words of her novel, no matter how busy she was. I figured she was too focused on trying to repair her marriage. The second day was the same. Everything on the surface seemed normal, as if we were just another couple weathering a rough patch. She kept up her usual routine, but didn't open her manuscript folder. I started to wonder when she'd notice, watching her closely for the moment it would hit her. Day 3 finally delivered. I was in the kitchen when I heard it, a sharp, panicked gasp from the living room, like someone had punched her in the stomach.
No.
"No, no, no," she muttered, her voice growing louder and more frantic. I walked in to find her pale and trembling, staring at her laptop screen, clicking through folders like a woman possessed. She was checking everywhere, cloud storage, her email, desperately hunting for the files. "Babe," she said, her voice quivering. "Do you have any copies of my book? You know, from when you were reviewing chapters for me?" For a split second, I felt a pang of guilt. I did have copies in my email. But then I thought about the late nights I spent working overtime to buy her that laptop. And just like that, the guilt evaporated. "No, sorry," I said, feigning concern. "Let me check my computer, though." I made a show of searching through my files, pretending to come up empty. "Nothing here," I finally said. "Did you check your backups?" She was pulling at her hair now, something she only did when she was deeply stressed. The last time I saw her like that was when her dad was in the hospital. It's gone, she whispered, her voice hollow. Everything's gone. 3 years of work just gone. Then she turned to me, her eyes wide with accusation. Did you delete it? The sheer nerve of her, asking that after what she'd done, almost made me laugh. As if she had any right to be angry with me. I put on my best look of indignation. Are you serious? You think I'd stoop that low? That's more your style. You're the one who knows how to hurt the people you claim to love. Saying that last part felt unexpectedly cathartic. That's when she broke. Not the crocodile tears she'd weaponized before, but real, guttural sobs that racked her entire body. The kind of crying that strips away pretense and leaves a person raw. It was oddly poetic, watching her unravel after I'd spent days barely holding myself together. Karma, as they say, is a relentless force. I stood there, arms crossed, as Jenna dissolved into a mess on the floor. 3 years of her work were gone, and so was my 6 years of trust. Fair trade, if you ask me. While she was drowning in her despair over the lost manuscript, I decided it was time for the final act. I put on my best epiphany face, the kind of expression that said I'd just realized something profound. I've been kidding myself, I said, shaking my head for effect. Thinking we could work things out. This is too much. You destroyed everything we had. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. Her face crumbled even more, if that was even possible. Perfect timing. Really, her precious book was gone, and now her last sliver of hope for saving our marriage was vanishing too. The sound that came out of her then wasn't crying. It was something primal, like the noise an animal makes when it's mortally wounded. I watched her crumple into a broken heap on the floor, her body convulsing with sobs that barely sounded human. Meanwhile, I calmly packed my things, shoving clothes, electronics, and important documents into bags and boxes. I left the wedding album right where it was. She could burn it for all I cared. Just before walking out, I paused. I couldn't resist twisting the knife one last time. Sorry about your book, I said, trying to sound sincere. But hey, it's all still in your head, right? You can always start over. The look she gave me then was pure venom. I think she realized at that moment that I deleted it, but what could she do? Accuse me of destroying her manuscript after she'd destroyed our marriage? I walked out of that apartment feeling lighter than I had in weeks, like I'd finally balanced the scales. Now I'm staying in a dingy extended stay motel while I search for a new place. The carpet has suspicious stains, and the neighbors seem to enjoy fighting at 3 in the morning, but it's still better than staying in that apartment. The lease is up in 4 months anyway. Jenna can figure out how to pay for it on her own. Maybe she'll work out another special arrangement with the landlord. They seem to have that dynamic down already. I know she can't afford the place by herself. Even with both our incomes, rent was tight every month. But that's not my problem anymore. Maybe she'll move in with her new man. I'm sure his wife would love that. Or perhaps she'll start an OnlyFans. Clearly, she has no issues with people seeing her naked. Yesterday, my lawyer served her with divorce papers. She can keep the apartment and all the furniture. As far as I'm concerned, it's contaminated. I made sure I'd be compensated in other ways. Sure, I didn't have concrete proof of her affair. It's hard to take pictures when you're standing there in shock. But this wasn't about proving infidelity. This was about ensuring I could start over on stable footing. My lawyer was confident we'd get a decent settlement even without evidence. Jenna is desperate to keep her good girl image intact. I had enough leverage. The texts where she begged me to come back, admitting she made a mistake, and the implicit threat that I'd tell everyone we knew exactly what happened. That was motivation enough for her to agree to generous terms. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just destroying someone's dreams. It's walking away and letting them live with what they've done. 6 months later. It's been half a year since my last update, and the divorce is officially finalized. Jenna is now my ex-wife, the woman who thought sleeping with our landlord was a smart idea. Never thought I'd be divorced at 33, but life has a way of surprising you. Some of you asked why I didn't focus more on the landlord in my earlier updates. The answer is simple. He wasn't the one who betrayed my trust. He didn't take vows with me. He can jump off a cliff for all I care. The settlement worked out better than I expected. No alimony, thank God. The last thing I needed was to keep supporting Jenna while she figured out her mess of a life. I got to keep the car, which is worth more than all the furniture she kept combined. My lawyer really came through. Turns out, the threat of a tarnished reputation can be quite persuasive during negotiations. The funniest part came after the final hearing. We were outside the courthouse, and I couldn't resist asking, "So, how's the book coming along?" Her face twisted into something between rage and despair. If looks could kill, I'd be 6 feet under. She exploded, right there on the courthouse steps. "You deleted it." "I know you deleted it, you bastard." She was screaming, mascara running down her face, looking eerily similar to the day I caught her cheating. She admitted she'd tried to start over, to rewrite the manuscript from memory. But it wasn't the same. 3 years of work gone. "I'll never get it back," she wailed. Then she called me evil, a monster for destroying her dream. That's when I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Guess that makes 2 of us," I told her. "You destroyed our marriage. I destroyed your book." Karma's funny like that. She tried to argue that what I did was somehow worse, but I shut her down. Anything bad that happens to you from here on out is just the universe balancing the scales. Nothing to do with me. Through mutual friends, I later found out she couldn't afford the apartment after all. I guess copywriting doesn't pay as well when you're footing all the bills. No idea where she's living now, maybe with her parents, maybe with the landlord. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. It's crazy how different my life looks now compared to 6 months ago. Back then, I thought Jenna and I would grow old together. I thought we'd celebrate when her book got published, maybe start a family when we were more stable. I did everything right, supported her dreams, worked hard, stayed faithful. But you can't make someone value what they have. You know what, though? I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I've got a smaller place, but it's mine. I'm back at the gym, reconnected with old friends, and even gone on a few dates. Nothing serious yet. Trust issues are hard to overcome, but I'm getting there. They say living well is the best revenge, but I think destroying someone's dreams and living well is even better. Some might think I went too far, but those people have probably never walked in on their spouse betraying them like that. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. She took something irreplaceable from me, so I took something irreplaceable from her. Fair is fair. And me? I'll be just fine. I've got a good job and, most importantly, my self-respect. I can't say the same for Jenna. Last I heard, she's still trying to rewrite that book. Maybe she'll get there eventually. After all, she already knows that story by heart.